It was back in December, where I remember reading I think it was in one of the newspapers about this court case in San Francisco. We hear about court cases all the time, and we hear about jury verdicts all the time, and those don't raise any eyebrows. What caught my personal attention was a finding by a jury of fraud. And that, when I saw that, I said, what's here? To be honest, that put us in a very difficult situation. I mean, I don't want to be sitting there reading the New York Times, the Washington Post, and have to find out what a company is doing or whether documents exist. Once we had evidence that there was documents like that did raise questions, we went full speed ahead. That day, we sent people in to get those documents. Those documents, they were Federal Express. I remember they arrived in my home. It was a Friday. They arrived in my home, Federal Express, the next day. We spent a lot of time looking at those documents. They're different systems. You know, they're very different systems that are established. Let me let Margaret Porter talk about her views as counsel on how we can better, coordinate those two systems.
I guess what I would say is that I have a concern when protective orders are used to prevent individuals from bringing information to the FDA as a regulatory agency to carry out its regulatory functions. As Dr. Kessler indicated, the private tort liability system and the FDA regulatory system are separate systems, and protective orders may be used appropriately in certain circumstances in private litigation. I wouldn't want my comments to be construed otherwise. But I do have a concern if it happens that the agency is prevented from getting the information it needs.
Is there any legal instrument or is there any change in law that might be recommended that could, again, with the overriding and compelling concern being women's health, without prejudicing whatever that ongoing case may be, so that this information, sooner rather than later, can be made available to the regulatory people like yourself?
Let us look and think a little about that. I think it is an important question. Understand, it was one of the most difficult issues. Here, I was confronted with all this information, but I couldn't talk about it because it was under a protective order. Now, what we did, and what the agency has done on a number of instances, we went into court. But it put us in a very difficult position. People legitimately said, where's the beef when we did the moratorium? But I was not going to violate a protective order. The process for lifting the protective order is a process that we went through. It took some time. But I think that we do need to give some thought about whether it could be done any better.
If you could stay in contact with